Well, hi everyone. It's so great to be here with you all. And this is so interesting because what I'm going to be talking about kind of goes along. Like Coach Lee said, it kind of goes along with what Kemya was saying about, trying these new things. And she mentioned like, well, we might just be wanting to like watch Netflix and sit on the couch instead of like doing all these things if we feel overwhelmed. And so that is part of how our brain has evolved. And I'll be talking about that and how we can overcome that. So, the motivational triad. How many people have heard of this concept before? Raise your hand. Okay. So, well, I can't see everyone, so maybe not that many. So the motivational triad, our brains, even when we want to make positive changes in our lives, there's a part of our brain that evolved to survive. And in order to survive, it found three things that it wants to do. And so it wants to avoid pain, seek pleasure, and be efficient. And so that part with the arrow is the primitive brain that has evolved to do that. So our primitive brain wants things to be easy and familiar, and it wants to do what it's already good at doing. And then, avoiding pain and seeking pleasure comes along with those things. So, if we're trying to if we're trying to market ourselves, that might feel scary and intimidating for whatever reasons. And so our primitive brain is like, nope, I'm going to avoid pain. I want to do things that are easy. I want to do things that I'm already good at. And so marketing is hard. I'm just going to procrastinate on that and not do it. And so we might find ourselves doing anything, like if our goal is to be consistent with marketing, we might find ourselves doing anything but being consistent with marketing. We might be cleaning our house. We might be watching Netflix. We might be food prepping. We're like, okay, well, we'll just meal prep instead of market. Um, what we do to overcome our primitive brain is using our prefrontal cortex, which is the more sophisticated part and newest part of our brain. It is part of what makes us human. And so that part of our brain allows us to make plans, organize things, and delay gratification. And so we can override our primitive brain using our prefrontal cortex to make plans ahead of time. And so, with Kenya going through this exercise, this is our plan ahead of time. Because if we go into something without a plan, it's very easy to decide to do something else or decide to do it a different way. Even when, we're trying to go work out in the morning, go to the gym at, 6 in the morning. If we didn't make a plan ahead of time to like lay out our clothes and our shoes, um, in the morning, so it's easy for us to like get at those things. When it comes to 6 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be like, oh, I think I'm just going to stay in my bed and not go to the gym. Because again, that's avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, and wanting to do things that are easy for us. And that's also the instant gratification of allowing something pleasurable to kind of take priority over doing something that's harder, even though the long-term benefit of doing that hard thing will pay off in the end. And so that's why our prefrontal cortex allows us to delay the instant gratification that we might want to seek. All right. And so I hear a lot of my clients talking about their relationship with technology, be it their smartphones or playing games on their phones or on a console, social media, and even watching the news. People can get very overwhelmed by what they're hearing and all the inputs that are coming in. And so, even when they want to interact differently with technology, it's really hard to make those changes. And again, like I really do think that our smartphones and social media, and we've probably already heard this, and even games, they provide an instant hit of dopamine. And that's what our brains actually like. So that's the instant gratification. That's the pleasure. And so that's why it can be very difficult, even if we have an intention to make changes about our relationship with technology, to actually make those changes, because we might not be receiving those dopamine hits in the way that our phone or games or social media gives it to us. But we can find other ways to have dopamine hits outside of our phones and technology. So, what we can do first is to become aware of how we're actually spending our time with our devices and how we are interacting with them. And so how much time is that during the day? And why do we want to pick up our phones sometimes and just look at it and scroll? And so after that, how do we ideally want to spend our time instead? So this is part of making a plan to, you know, maybe every hour that you're doing work or that you're doing something that you want to be doing, you can say, okay, I'll reward myself with spending 20 minutes on my phone. And so it could be that we want to do 2-hour chunks of work before looking at our phone at all. And then how do the brain's desires to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and be efficient get in the way of making these changes? So again, like with the dopamine hits, we have pleasure and instant gratification from using our phones in a certain way or using our devices in a certain way, which I would say is maybe false pleasure. And there's this idea of buffering that I also talk about. Um, and I heard, I think it was Chris talk about this in our breakout group, just about feeling emotions and uncomfortable emotions. So when we're not used to feeling emotion, or when we want to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions, we will do things similar to how we want to avoid, like, let's say if we're feeling intimidated by marketing, we'll do other things to avoid that, to avoid marketing, but we'll also do things to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions. And so, if let's just take boredom as an uncomfortable emotion. If we're feeling bored, I've heard that it's actually a positive thing to allow yourself to feel bored, because then it gives space for our brain to actually expand and think about different things. Whereas if we're always trying to solve the problem of boredom, then we're going to try to look for other things to do and to entertain us and amuse us. And so that is maybe part of the reason why people might be on their devices more, because of this feeling of boredom. Or it could be a feeling of frustration. It could be a feeling of sadness. It could be a feeling of exasperation. And instead of allowing ourselves to feel those feelings, we might be on our devices, we might be eating, we might be drinking, we might be exercising, we might be cleaning. And those things in and of themselves are not, negative things. It's just that if we're aware that we're doing those things to avoid something else, that's when it can become problematic. And I think we're all familiar with the idea of emotional eating. That is when the buffer that we have is food. And so when we want to avoid feeling our emotions, we'll eat instead. And that will create a sense of comfort. And again, that's our brain wanting to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And so what I actually offer to my clients is that, you don't have an overeating problem, you have an under feeling problem. And so what if you just allow yourself to feel the feelings instead of buffer them? And buffering is like putting a buffer between you and the uncomfortable emotion by doing another action. And so um, I know that with the motivational triad, I mentioned the three things of seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and wanting to be efficient. So maybe we can just take a few minutes to reflect. And it's like, what is one thing, one change that you would like to make in your life? And how does the motivational triad make this hard to do? And instead of not having a plan to help you support you in these changes, what is something you can remember that can help you make a plan ahead of time? And then what is one thing you're committed to doing to move forward with this change? And I'm just curious if someone has anything that they would be open to sharing right now. Maybe we can walk through this a little bit. And if not, that's okay too.
Okay. Is it okay if we switch over the Q&A right now?
Well, I just have one more slide. And
Okay.
so let me just cover this one more slide and then we can do that. Thank you for asking. So a new motivational triad is to seek growth, embrace discomfort. So let it be hard if it feels hard. I think one of the things is that gets in our way is that when we think something should be easy, but it's actually hard, just let it be hard and let yourself think that it's hard. So embrace that discomfort, and then expend massive effort wisely. And that's the new motivational triad. And that's it. So I can stop sharing my screen and we can